What if the wildest fears of our time were already filmed 50 years ago? In the 70s, political thrillers didn't just entertain, they whispered about futures that felt impossible back then but look disturbingly familiar now. What happens when fiction gets too close to the truth? Are these films warnings we ignored, or just eerie coincidences? Watch closely, because these 14 thrillers don't just belong to the past. They might still be shaping the way you see power, control, and trust. Chinatown, 1974. Few films slice open the idea of corruption with as much precision as Chinatown. On the surface, it's a detective story starring Jack Nicholson as private investigator Jake Gittes. But peel back the stylish veneer, and you find a story about how water rights, land ownership, and political greed are tied together in ways that feel all too modern. The brilliance of Roman Polanski's direction is how it lures you into a mystery that seems personal, only to reveal that the real crime is systemic. At its heart, Chinatown is about how the powerful rewrite the rules for their own gain. The film shows how an entire city's future can be reshaped, not through elections or public debate, but through shady land deals hidden from ordinary citizens. That theme has echoed into our present day, with stories of backroom agreements, corporate monopolies, and natural resources quietly being taken out of public hands. What makes the film especially haunting is its refusal to give the audience a clean resolution. The famous ending doesn't restore justice. Instead, it tells us that sometimes corruption is so deeply rooted that one person's fight doesn't even make a dent. In that way, Chinatown predicted a future where truth isn't always enough to change the outcome. Think about how often we hear about environmental resources being controlled by a handful of companies. Think about how often communities are told there's nothing they can do. Chinatown captured that bleak reality decades before it became common knowledge. It's more than a classic mystery. It's a reminder that the most dangerous secrets are often hidden in plain sight. The China Syndrome, 1979. Imagine a moment when the whole world could be put at risk, and the only thing standing in the way of disaster is a single whistleblower. That's the nerve-shredding setup of The China Syndrome, a thriller about a television reporter and her cameraman who stumble upon safety violations at a nuclear power plant. What begins as a routine news story spirals into a chilling exploration of how far corporations and officials will go to hide the truth. Jane Fonda plays the determined reporter, Michael Douglas is the sharp-eyed cameraman, and Jack Lemmon delivers one of his most powerful performances as the plant supervisor caught in the middle. The film balances tension with realism, showing us boardroom meetings where money outweighs safety and quiet moments where characters wrestle with the knowledge that speaking out could cost them everything. What makes The China Syndrome prophetic is its timing. Just 12 days after its release, the 3 Mile Island incident unfolded in Pennsylvania, suddenly making the film feel less like a thriller and more like a preview of reality. But the film's legacy goes beyond nuclear fears. It predicted the way industries could manipulate information, spin public opinion, and bury accountability under layers of technical jargon. Today, when conversations about energy, safety, and corporate responsibility dominate the headlines, the China Syndrome feels more relevant than ever. Its message is simple but devastating. When truth becomes inconvenient, it is often silenced. And when profit comes first, the public pays the price. The movie didn't just deliver edge-of-your-seat suspense, it tapped into a larger unease about whether ordinary people can trust the systems designed to protect them. That's the chilling brilliance of the China Syndrome. It doesn't just make you fear what could go wrong, it makes you wonder how many disasters were almost covered up before we even knew they existed. Serpico, 1973. Sometimes the most unsettling conspiracies aren't dreamed up in shadowy offices, but carried out on ordinary city streets. Serpico tells the true story of Frank Serpico, a New York police officer who dared to expose the corruption within his own department. Played with raw intensity by Al Pacino, Serpico's fight wasn't against an outside enemy. It was against a system that rewarded silence and punished honesty. The film drags you into a world where payoffs, intimidation, and cover-ups aren't the exception, but the rule. What makes it chilling is that it wasn't just a Hollywood invention. Serpico really lived it, and his bravery in blowing the whistle set off major reforms. But the story also predicted something larger, the way institutions close ranks when threatened from within. Watching it now, it feels eerily familiar. How many times have we seen insiders punished for exposing wrongdoing while the bigger machine rolls on unaffected? Serpico captures that lonely, dangerous path of the whistleblower, a theme that still dominates headlines decades later. Pacino's portrayal makes you feel the weight of paranoia, the fear of walking into work, not knowing who you can trust, and the ending doesn't give you a victory parade. It gives you a scarred man who fought a system too big to topple. That's what makes Serpico prophetic. It told us long ago that fighting corruption isn't just about bravery. It's about surviving in a world where power protects itself first. Marathon Man, 1976. At first glance, Marathon Man looks like a simple thriller about a graduate student caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But peel back the layers and you uncover a film that predicted a disturbing reality: how governments can cut secret deals with dangerous figures for the sake of convenience. Dustin Hoffman stars as Thomas Levy, an ordinary man pulled into a nightmare involving stolen diamonds, hidden war crimes, and operatives willing to silence anyone in their way. The tension is relentless, but what lingers is the theme. Marathon Man isn't just about running from danger. It's about how the powerful recycle old enemies into new allies, burying atrocities under the rug if it serves a bigger agenda. The presence of Laurence Olivier as a former war criminal hiding in plain sight adds to the chill. His character isn't some relic of history. He's a reminder that the past never truly stays buried when profit and power are on the line. What makes the film prophetic is the way it hints at uncomfortable truths. Governments making quiet deals. Agencies looking the other way. Whistleblowers silenced while ordinary people pay the price. Sound like a stretch? Look at the news cycles of the past few decades and it feels less like fiction and more like foresight. Marathon Man leaves you shaken not just because of its suspense, but because it whispers something no one wants to admit. Sometimes the scariest truths aren't locked in the past. They're hidden in the compromises made today. The Boys from Brazil, 1978. What if the darkest ideas of history weren't buried, but quietly kept alive? The Boys from Brazil dares to imagine that possibility. Starring Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier, the film presents a chilling story about a group of powerful figures secretly working to carry on the vision of a fallen regime. It's not set in smoky backrooms of Washington or London, but in the hidden corners of the world where science and power collide. The plot follows a Nazi hunter who discovers a sinister plan involving cloning and the recreation of authoritarian leaders. While the science may have felt outrageous at the time, the themes strike far closer to home. The real story isn't about test tubes or laboratories. It's about the idea that wealth and influence can preserve destructive ideologies long after the world claims to have defeated them. What makes The Boys from Brazil prophetic is its focus on secrecy. It predicted that modern dangers don't always come from armies marching in the open. They come from carefully guarded projects shielded by money, influence, and denial. It suggested that history doesn't just repeat, it mutates, adapting itself into forms that are harder to detect. Today, the film feels eerily current in conversations about how technology can be misused, how certain ideas refuse to die, and how shadowy networks can span continents. The suspense is gripping, but the bigger impact is philosophical. The film asks, can evil be engineered, packaged, and unleashed under the disguise of progress? The Boys from Brazil makes you wonder if the past is ever really past. The Odessa File, 1974. Based on the novel by Frederick Forsyth, The Odessa File spins a web of intrigue around a journalist who uncovers evidence of a secret post-war organization helping former members of the Third Reich slip through the cracks of history. Jon Voight stars as the reporter whose discovery drags him into a dangerous hunt across Europe. The story is part thriller, part history lesson. It confronts the uncomfortable possibility that justice after the war was never as complete as we like to believe. The film suggests that powerful networks can protect those who should have been held accountable, letting them slip into new identities while still pulling strings from behind the curtain. What makes the Odessa File so relevant is its focus on denial and secrecy. The narrative points to a world where accountability is selective, where crimes can be hidden behind bureaucracy and new beginnings. Watching it now, it mirrors how often investigations in the real world run into walls of red tape or disappear into silence. The movie also predicted the theme of hidden networks that continues to dominate modern thrillers and real-life exposes. From financial systems that hide fortunes to offshore structures shielding identities, the same ideas echo today. The Odessa File doesn't just thrill with its suspense, it reminds us that sometimes the scariest truths are the ones history books leave out. The Laughing Policeman, 1973. On the surface, The Laughing Policeman might look like a straightforward detective story about a mass shooting on a city bus. But this film, adapted from the Swedish crime novel, is steeped in the paranoia of its era. Walter Matthau stars as a weary cop trying to piece together why a seemingly random act of violence is actually part of a far larger plot. The brilliance of the film is how it blends gritty police work with the unsettling sense that bigger forces are pulling the strings. Every lead opens up more questions, and every character seems caught in a web of silence. The violence is shocking, but the real tension comes from the possibility that no one is telling the truth, not even the authorities who should be protecting the public. The Laughing Policeman predicted a world where random tragedies aren't always random, where hidden motives may lurk behind events that seem senseless on the surface. It tapped into a growing fear that official explanations might be too neat, too quick, and too convenient. Watching it today, the film feels like a commentary on how public trust erodes when answers never quite add up. The investigation becomes a metaphor for society's larger search for truth in a fog of half-truths and denials. The Laughing Policeman doesn't hand you a simple resolution, it hands you the unease that maybe some stories are meant to stay unsolved, not because they can't be solved, but because solving them might reveal too much. Day of the Jackal, 1973. Few thrillers capture the cold precision of political intrigue like Day of the Jackal. Directed by Fred Zinnemann, this film tells the story of a professional assassin hired to eliminate a head of state. What makes it unforgettable isn't just the suspense, but the chilling realism. Every step of the plan is carefully plotted, from false passports to hidden identities, creating a portrait of a world where power can be challenged, not by armies, but by one man with the right connections. The film doesn't just entertain, it predicted the rise of globalized conspiracies. The story crosses borders, showing how political plots don't stop at national lines. It exposed the idea that operations could be managed by unseen figures moving between countries, corporations, and governments. That vision of transnational intrigue has become more real with every decade. Day of the Jackal is also striking for its cold detachment. It doesn't glamorize the assassin. It shows the machinery behind the plot, the meticulous planning, and the vulnerability of even the most secure leaders. Today, the film resonates in conversations about how fragile public safety can be, and how the greatest threats often operate quietly in the shadows of official narratives. What makes it prophetic is its message that the forces shaping history aren't always visible. They are hidden in files, whispered in backrooms, and executed with chilling calm. Day of the Jackal is more than a thriller. It's a reminder that control can be undermined in ways the public never sees coming. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. At first glance, Nicholas Roeg's The Man Who Fell to Earth looks like science fiction, with David Bowie playing an alien who arrives on Earth seeking water for his dying planet. But beneath the strangeness lies one of the most cutting political commentaries of the decade. This is a story about innovation crushed by greed, about how corporations strangle progress when it threatens profit. Bowie's character introduces technology that could change the world, but instead of being celebrated, he's swallowed by the machinery of power. Businessmen and officials don't see salvation, they see competition. His inventions are seized, his mission sabotaged, and his hope for his people destroyed. The real conspiracy here isn't about spaceships. It's about how human ambition sabotages solutions for the greater good. The film feels prophetic in today's world of suppressed patents, corporate monopolies, and innovations quietly shelved because they disrupt the status quo. The man who fell to earth dared to ask, what if the biggest obstacle to progress isn't lack of knowledge, but the greed of those who already hold it? Its eerie visuals and haunting performance from Bowie make the film unforgettable, but it's the underlying message that lingers. Innovation can be a threat when profit is the priority. And when progress is buried, humanity pays the price. That's the conspiracy at the core of The Man Who Fell to Earth, one that looks less like fantasy and more like foresight. Coma, 1978. Hospitals are supposed to be places of trust, but Michael Crichton's Coma flips that idea on its head. The story follows a young doctor, played by Geneviève Bujold, who stumbles upon a terrifying pattern. Patients going in for routine surgeries are not waking up, and the explanations don't add up. The deeper she digs, the more she realizes the institution she trusts is hiding something sinister. The suspense builds not through car chases or shootouts, but through the horrifying realization that the conspiracy is happening in broad daylight, under the sterile lights of the operating room. Michael Douglas co-stars. But it's Bujold's relentless search for the truth that drives the story forward. What makes Coma prophetic is its focus on the commodification of human life. It imagines a system where people are reduced to resources, where trust in medicine can be manipulated for profit. While the details may be exaggerated, the underlying fear feels timeless. What if the very institutions designed to protect us are quietly exploiting us? Today, in an era of debates over healthcare, data privacy, and medical ethics, Coma resonates with uncomfortable clarity. It reminds us that blind trust in powerful systems can be dangerous, and that questioning authority isn't paranoia, it's survival. The film leaves viewers with a lingering chill, not because of what it shows, but because of what it implies. If corruption can seep into hospitals, is there any place safe from it? Coma's answer is unsettling. Maybe not. The Domino Principle, 1977. What if freedom itself is just another illusion? The Domino Principle tackles that chilling idea head-on. Directed by Stanley Kramer, the film stars Gene Hackman as Roy Tucker, a man unexpectedly released from prison by an anonymous organization. His debt for this miracle? Carrying out a mission he doesn't understand, with his very life hanging in the balance. The setup feels like redemption, but it quickly curdles into paranoia. Tucker is not free at all. He's a pawn in a sprawling web of manipulation, where every decision has already been mapped out by forces he can't see. The brilliance of the film is how it portrays conspiracy not as a sudden shock, but as a slow erosion of autonomy. Tucker doesn't choose his fate, it's chosen for him long before he realizes the game he's in. The Domino Principle predicted the way modern systems can quietly steer people toward outcomes without them ever noticing. Today, with conversations about psychological profiling, algorithm-driven decisions, and subtle manipulation of behavior, the film feels less like a Cold War thriller and more like a preview of our data-driven reality. The haunting message is simple. Control doesn't always mean chains or bars. Sometimes it's invisible. Sometimes it's the choices you think you made yourself. That's what makes the Domino Principle so unsettling. It whispers that freedom might already be compromised. The Conversation, 1974. Francis Ford. Coppola's The Conversation is one of the quietest yet most devastating political thrillers of the decade. Gene Hackman stars as Harry Call, a surveillance expert who prides himself on his technical skills and his ability to remain detached from the lives he monitors. But the more he listens, the more he realizes he may have become an accessory to something far darker. What makes the film chilling is its restraint. There are no explosions or high-speed pursuits. Instead, the suspense grows from whispers on a tape, from half-heard phrases that hint at something terrible just out of reach. Call becomes obsessed, replaying the same recordings over and over, trying to understand if he's uncovered evidence of a violent plot or if his own paranoia is consuming him. The conversation predicted not just the rise of surveillance, but the psychological toll it takes on both the watcher and the watched. In today's world of constant monitoring, facial recognition, and digital footprints, the story feels hauntingly familiar. The idea that privacy can be stripped away without our knowledge is no longer fiction. It's daily reality. Coppola didn't just give us a thriller, he gave us a meditation on guilt, paranoia, and the price of information. And in an era where every click and conversation can be tracked, the conversation feels less like a product of the 70s and more like a message delivered ahead of schedule. So, there you have it. 14 more political thrillers from the 70s that didn't just shock audiences, they looked straight into the future. Each one carried a warning tucked inside the suspense, and half a century later, those warnings feel louder than ever. Which of these films do you think nailed the prediction best? Drop your thoughts below, subscribe for more deep dives, and share this with anyone who loves cinema that makes you think. Because the strangest part isn't what these films got wrong, it's how much they got right.